Welcome back to our channel. Did you know your Washington quarters might be secretly worth millions? A rare 1932 D just sold for over $343,000. Like and subscribe for more hidden coin treasures. Have you ever flipped a quarter into a vending machine without giving it a second thought? Most of us have. The US quarter dollar, sturdy, familiar, ordinary. Or so it seems. But what if I told you that sitting in your pocket change, or stashed in an old jar on your dresser, a 1967 US quarter dollar could actually be worth as much as $132,000? It sounds impossible, but it's true. Hidden among the millions of coins minted that year are rare errors, transitional oddities, and fascinating anomalies that transform this humble piece of silver-colored metal into one of the most sought-after treasures in modern numismatics. Tonight, we're going to uncover the surprising history and shocking value of the 1967 US quarter, and by the end you may never look at your change the same way again. Our story begins at the height of one of the most chaotic periods in US coinage history, the late 1960s. In 1964, faced with a critical silver shortage, the US Mint made the historic decision to remove silver from dimes and quarters entirely. For nearly 2 centuries, American coins had contained real precious metal, but with rising silver prices and increased hoarding by the public, something had to give. By 1965, the Mint began producing quarters with a clad composition, an inner core of copper sandwiched between outer layers of cupronickel. These coins retained the familiar shine of silver but contained no silver at all. Collectors call these the clad coins, and they were met with both curiosity and disappointment. Millions of Americans rushed to pull pre-1965 silver quarters out of circulation, while the Mint ramped up production of the new clad quarters to keep up with demand. That brings us to 1967, the third year of clad quarter production, and a year of massive output. Over 1.5 billion quarters were struck at the Philadelphia Mint alone, with additional production at Denver and San Francisco. But 1967 was also a year of experimentation, transition, and haste. The Mint had temporarily suspended mint marks that year to discourage hoarding, and the sheer volume of coins produced meant that quality control often faltered. In that rushed, chaotic environment, a handful of extraordinary errors slipped through the cracks. Among the most spectacular are the transitional errors. During the changeover to clad planchets, some of the old 90% silver blanks remained mixed in with the new stock. In 1967, a small number of quarters were struck on leftover silver planchets. These coins weigh slightly more, around 6.25 grams compared to the standard 5.67 grams of the clad version, and they have a richer, warmer tone than their nickel-coated counterparts. These transitional silver quarters are exceedingly rare, but a few have surfaced, often found by sharp-eyed collectors weighing rolls of coins. One certified example of a 1967 quarter struck on a silver planchet sold at auction for over $48,000. But the silver transitional error isn't the only prize hiding in 1967 quarters. There are also dramatic double die obverse errors, coins where the design appears slightly doubled due to misalignment during die preparation. On a 1967 quarter with a double die obverse, you might notice ghost-like doubling in the word Liberty, on Washington's profile, or in the motto "In God We Trust." At first glance it can be subtle, but under magnification it becomes unmistakable. Only a handful of these have been authenticated, and their rarity fuels intense demand. In 2021, a pristine double die obverse 1967 quarter sold for over $50,000 at auction. Even more spectacular are the rare wrong planchet strikes. 1967 quarters have been discovered struck on dime planchets, producing a visibly smaller coin with the full quarter design squeezed into a shrunken circle. Others have been found struck on experimental planchets, blanks of unusual alloys being tested at the time. Each one of these errors tells its own story, a moment when the Mint's great machines, under pressure to churn out billions of coins, briefly faltered and created something unique. One of these off-metal 1967 quarters fetched a jaw-dropping $68,000 when it came to market, the kind of find that makes collectors' hearts race. And then there are the dramatic off-center strikes, where the blank planchet was fed into the press at the wrong angle or position. These coins can range from mildly misaligned to nearly 75% off-center, creating a bizarre crescent of blank metal and a warped, ghostly portrait of Washington. While not as rare as a silver transitional or a double die, high-grade off-center 1967 quarters still command thousands of dollars from eager collectors. To understand why these coins are so highly prized, we have to look at the context. The late 1960s were a turning point in American coinage. The switch to clad composition, the removal of mint marks, the sheer volume of production, it all created a perfect storm for errors to happen. But finding one of those errors is another matter. Out of the more than 1.5 billion quarters minted in 1967, only a handful of notable errors have ever been found and certified. That incredible rarity, paired with the historic moment these coins represent, makes them irresistible to collectors. These aren't just coins. They're artifacts of a turbulent chapter in our monetary history. One of the most famous examples of a rare 1967 quarter surfaced in an estate sale in Ohio. The owner, a retired machinist, had collected coins casually for decades, stashing away anything that looked unusual. After his passing, his grandchildren found an envelope marked simply, "Odd Quarter." Inside was a brilliant 1967 Washington quarter that, to the untrained eye, looked normal enough, but on closer inspection, it weighed slightly more and had a different sheen. When they brought it to a coin dealer, it was identified as a silver transitional error, and later sold at auction for an astonishing $76,000. For the family, it was an unexpected windfall. For collectors, it was another thrilling reminder that treasures still hide in the most ordinary places, and that's one of the greatest appeals of this hobby, the idea that you don't have to be a professional, or spend a fortune, to make a discovery. Anyone can check their change. Anyone can examine a jar of coins on the shelf. Anyone can be the next person to uncover a rare and valuable coin that history left behind. It takes patience, curiosity, and just a little bit of knowledge. Condition matters, of course. A silver transitional error or double die in well-worn condition might still bring a few $1,000s, but in brilliant uncirculated condition, with sharp details and minimal marks, the value skyrockets. That's why collectors often send their finds to professional graders like PCGS or NGC. A coin that looks ordinary in a pocket can suddenly become a 5- or 6-figure treasure when properly authenticated and preserved. Those plastic slabs you see at shows aren't just for show, they're a seal of authenticity, a guarantee of quality, and a badge of honor for the collector who found it. So what does all of this mean for you? It means that tonight, before you drop another quarter into a parking meter or vending machine, take a closer look. Examine the date. Look at the shine. Weigh it if you can. Study Washington's profile and the lettering under magnification. If anything looks odd, doubling, misalignment, unusual weight, don't dismiss it. Set it aside and do some research. Compare it to images of known errors. If it seems promising, get it certified. You could be holding something worth far more than its face value. Stories like the Ohio estate find happen more often than you think. Across the country, people continue to discover rare coins in the most ordinary of places, tucked in jars, rolled in bank bags, even slipped into circulation. Every collector dreams of being the one who finds the next legendary error. Why not you? All it takes is a little vigilance and a willingness to look a little closer at the world around you. The 1967 U.S. quarter is a testament to that idea, that even in a year of massive, rushed production, a few extraordinary coins slipped through. Coins that tell stories. Coins that connect us to a fascinating moment in American history. Coins that turn pocket change into something priceless. So here's your challenge: go check your quarters. Dig out that old jar. Look through those rolls from the bank. Because hiding in the sea of clad, common quarters could be a rare gem waiting to be discovered. And if you're lucky, that ordinary-looking 1967 quarter could be worth anywhere from $48,000 to as much as $132,000. Happy hunting. And remember, sometimes, the smallest, most ordinary things carry the greatest secrets. You just have to be willing to see them. How many times have you paid for a coffee or fed a parking meter with a quarter, never thinking twice about it? The US quarter dollar is one of the most common coins in America, reliable, familiar, and seemingly unremarkable. But sometimes, in the most ordinary of places, extraordinary stories are hiding. Take the 1974 US quarter dollar for example. To most people, it's just another coin from the 70s. But hidden among the millions struck that year are incredibly rare errors and fascinating anomalies that have turned a handful of these coins into treasures worth as much as $122,000. Tonight, we're going to uncover the hidden history, the numismatic secrets, and the incredible value behind the 1974 quarter. By the end of this journey, you might just find yourself checking your pocket change with a brand new sense of wonder. Our story begins in the early 1970s, a decade after the US Mint removed silver from dimes and quarters in response to rising metal prices and rampant hoarding. By 1974, the clad coinage of copper and nickel was well established. That year, the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints struck over 800 million quarters combined. Philadelphia produced the majority, while Denver contributed with the distinctive D mint mark. San Francisco, meanwhile, focused on producing proof coins, beautiful, mirror-like strikes intended for collectors. The proof coins were carefully handled and struck multiple times for clarity and brilliance, while the circulation coins were churned out by the millions, often with little regard for precision. That difference in care would become crucial for the errors and anomalies that collectors now seek. In 1974, the Mint was already testing ideas for a new dollar coin, one that would replace the large and unpopular Eisenhower dollar with something smaller and lighter. That testing involved experimenting with aluminum planchets, and it's during this time of experimentation and transition that mistakes began to creep into the presses. A few extraordinary 1974 quarters slipped through the Mint's tight controls, and those mistakes are what make these coins so valuable today. Among the most intriguing are the transitional errors. In the frenzy of testing new compositions for other coins, some quarters in 1974 were struck on experimental aluminum planchets intended for the never-issued aluminum cent. These quarters are shockingly light and have a distinctly different color and feel compared to their copper-nickel counterparts. Only a handful of these aluminum error quarters have ever surfaced, and their rarity makes them nearly priceless. One of these coins was once confiscated by the Secret Service because aluminum was never officially authorized for quarters, a testament to just how unusual and controversial these pieces are. When one finally made it to auction, it sold for more than $60,000. Then there are the famous double die obverse errors. On a small number of 1,974 quarters, you can see the doubling clearly in the lettering of Liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," or even Washington's profile itself. This doubling happens when the die used to strike the coin is improperly aligned during manufacture, creating a ghost-like second image. Double die quarters from 1974 are exceedingly rare, and pristine examples have crossed the auction block for as much as $50,000, a staggering sum for a coin with a face value of just 25 cents, and there's more. In the hurried atmosphere of the 1970s Mint, a few wrong planchet errors occurred, coins struck on blanks intended for foreign coins or for dimes or even pennies. These wrong planchet 1974 quarters can be identified by their incorrect weight and size, and they often display incomplete or distorted designs. Collectors clamor for these oddities, and when they appear at auction, they frequently fetch sums in the tens of thousands of dollars. One especially spectacular example came to light just a few years ago. A collector in Arizona was sifting through rolls of quarters from his local bank when he noticed something odd. One of the quarters was visibly thinner and lighter in color than the rest. Intrigued, he brought it to a local dealer, who quickly identified it as a 1974 quarter struck on an experimental aluminum planchet. After authentication and grading, the coin sold at auction for over $90,000, and the story made headlines in numismatic circles as a thrilling reminder of how treasures still hide in plain sight, even among more common errors like dramatic off-center strikes or broad strikes. The 1974 quarter can bring in surprising sums. Coins with significant portions of the design missing, yet still showing enough detail to confirm their identity, are highly collectible. The more dramatic the error and the higher the condition, the higher the price collectors are willing to pay. Some off-center 1974 quarters have sold for over $10,000, and broad strikes in pristine condition are not far behind. much of the mystique of the 1974 quarter lies in its historical context. This was a period of experimentation, of mistakes born of haste and high demand. The mint was under pressure to innovate while also keeping up with the needs of commerce. In that environment, unusual things happened. And those unusual things, frozen forever in metal, became the rare coins that collectors cherish today. One particularly captivating story comes from a retired Navy veteran in Oregon. For decades, he had kept an old coffee can filled with coins he collected while stationed overseas and traveling across the U.S. After he passed away, his granddaughter began sorting through the can. There, nestled among dozens of ordinary quarters, was a 1974 quarter unlike any she had ever seen. Lighter, brighter, and with subtle doubling visible under a magnifying glass, the coin caught her eye. She brought it to a coin shop in Portland, and after expert analysis, it was confirmed to be a rare aluminum transitional error with a minor double die obverse, a truly once-in-a-lifetime find. The coin was later auctioned for $84,000, changing the family's life and cementing the veteran's humble collection as something extraordinary. These stories are not just about luck, they're about awareness. About paying attention to the little details that most people overlook. The most valuable coins are hiding where you least expect them, in your change, in an old drawer, in rolls from the bank. And the thrill of discovery isn't reserved for professional collectors. Anyone with a sharp eye and a little curiosity can make a find that changes their life. If you decide to start looking, remember, condition is everything. The most valuable 1974 quarters are those in brilliant uncirculated condition, showing sharp details and little to no wear. But even a circulated example of a rare error can still fetch thousands of dollars. Always have potential finds authenticated and graded by a reputable service like PCGS or NGC. Not only does this confirm the coin's identity, but it also protects its value when it comes time to sell. So what should you look for? Start by examining the date, 1974. Check for anything unusual in weight or color. Compare it to a standard quarter. Look closely at the lettering and Washington's profile for signs of doubling. Inspect the edges and size. If something seems off, even slightly, set it aside for closer inspection. You never know what you might have stumbled upon. The 1974 US quarter dollar teaches us a powerful lesson: even the most ordinary objects can hold extraordinary secrets. At a glance, it's just another quarter. But under the right circumstances, with the right history, it becomes a time capsule, a mystery, a treasure. For collectors, these coins are a connection to a fascinating era of American coinage history. For everyone else, they're a reminder to look a little closer at the world around us. So tonight, before you drop another quarter into a machine or toss one into a tip jar, take a second look. You might be holding something far more valuable than you realize. Check your change. Search those jars. Go through those old rolls from the bank. Because hidden among the millions of 1974 quarters are a few rare gems worth far more than face value, and if you're lucky enough to find one, you could be holding a coin worth anywhere from $44,000 to an astounding $122,000. Happy hunting. And remember, every coin has a story. Sometimes, that story is worth a fortune. Every day, we exchange coins without a second thought, feeding them into vending machines, handing them over at gas stations, or letting them gather dust in old kitchen drawers. They pass through our lives so routinely, so unassumingly, that we rarely pause to think about the stories they might hold. But what if one of those forgotten coins, one as ordinary as a 1983 US quarter, wasn't ordinary at all? What if nestled in your change jar was a rare and valuable error, a fluke of the minting process, a quarter that could be worth as much as $108,000? Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of history and shining a spotlight on the 1983 quarter, a coin born during a turbulent time at the U.S. Mint, and one that has become a sought-after treasure for collectors across the country. The year was 1983. America was in the thick of the Reagan era, grappling with economic recovery, Cold War tensions, and a culture shifting rapidly toward modernism. Amid this backdrop, the U.S. Mint was facing challenges of its own. In 1982, due to budget cuts, the mint had suspended production of traditional uncirculated mint sets, those carefully packaged sets of coins that collectors relied on for pristine specimens. The halt in mint set production continued into 1983, meaning there were no official mint sets released for circulation coins that year. It might not sound like much, but for collectors, this was a huge deal. It meant that finding high-grade examples of 1,983 coins, especially quarters, would be significantly harder. Coins from 1983 that entered circulation were struck for everyday use, not saved in pristine condition. Most were tossed into change and quickly worn down, but sometimes, amidst all that wear and tear, something unexpected happened. Philadelphia and Denver struck a combined total of over 1.2 billion quarters that year. Philadelphia struck over 673 million, and Denver contributed more than 617 million. These numbers are staggering, but they mask a hidden truth. Among those billions of coins, a small number were minted with serious, valuable errors. Some were double dies. Some were struck on the wrong planchets. Others were off-center, broad-struck, or missing clad layers. All of them were born from brief moments of chaos in the otherwise mechanized precision of the U.S. Mint. One of the most famous 1983 quarter errors is the double die reverse, a dramatic variety where the letters on the reverse, especially E pluribus unum, show visible doubling. These coins are highly coveted, not just because of the doubling, but because of how few examples exist in top condition. Finding one in high grade is like finding a needle in a haystack. The majority were spent, scraped, dinged, and forgotten. But one uncirculated example surfaced at auction several years ago and stunned collectors. It featured incredibly sharp doubling on the reverse, and the rest of the coin was virtually flawless. That one coin fetched over $40,000 under the gavel, a jaw-dropping price for what was once just pocket change. Then there are the off-metal errors. A few 1983 quarters were mistakenly struck on planchets meant for other coins, including nickels and pennies. These wrong planchet quarters weigh less, often have a different tone, and feature missing or incomplete designs. A particularly rare specimen was discovered to have been struck on a copper planchet typically used for 1-cent coins. The coin was slightly smaller and had a red tint. It made its way to auction after a collector pulled it from a coin roll he purchased at a local bank, and after authentication, it sold for an incredible $55,000. But one of the most dramatic and misunderstood errors from 1983 involves quarters missing their outer nickel layer. The U.S. quarter is composed of a copper core sandwiched between two layers of cupronickel. Occasionally, due to a mishap in the planchet preparation process, one of the nickel layers is completely absent. The resulting coin appears duller, redder, and more like a penny in color. These are known as clad layer missing errors, and when found in mint condition, they can command impressive prices. A 1983 quarter missing its clad layer on the obverse, leaving a copper front and a silvery reverse, sold for over $30,000 after being graded as nearly uncirculated, and let's not forget the incredibly rare full brockage strikes. These are coins struck with another coin still stuck in the die, resulting in a mirrored, inkest image on one side. Such coins are the crown jewels of modern mint errors. A full brockage 1983 D quarter once surfaced in a private collection and, after authentication, fetched nearly $70,000 at auction. All of this is magnified by one very important factor: 1983 was the second year in a row that the mint did not release mint sets. That absence means there are very few pristine 1983 quarters in existence. Most of the coins that survive today were used and abused, leaving high-grade error coins in exceptionally short supply. That scarcity alone has pushed the value of even modest errors through the roof. In numismatics, rarity plus condition equals value, and the 1983 quarter fits that formula perfectly. One fascinating story involves a retired machinist from Minnesota named Frank. Frank wasn't a coin collector by trade, he just enjoyed sorting through change in his spare time. One day in the mid-2000s, while organizing old coins with his grandson, he spotted a 1983 quarter that looked strange. The reverse seemed fuzzy, not sharp like the others. Curious, he brought it to a coin show in Minneapolis. There, under magnification, a dealer spotted the telltale signs of a double die reverse, and not just any double die, but one of the clearest known examples. That coin was eventually submitted for grading and sold at a major auction for just over $63,000. Frank used the money to take his grandson on a trip across the country, a memory that would last a lifetime, all thanks to a coin most people would have ignored, and it's not just collectors or hobbyists making these finds. One young woman from Georgia, completely new to numismatics, pulled a 1983 quarter from a roll she received from a coin-counting machine at her local grocery store. She noticed the coin felt lighter and had an unusual color. After doing a bit of online research, she suspected it might be missing its clad layer. She submitted it to a grading service, and when the results came back, her suspicion was confirmed. It was a rare clad layer missing error, and because of its sharp details and lack of wear, it earned a high grade. When the coin went to auction, it sold for nearly $45,000. She paid off student loans with the money, all from a coin worth just 25 cents at face value. The 1983 quarter is a reminder that magic can still exist in the most mundane places. Its rarity is not flashy or obvious. It's quiet, hidden, buried beneath years of circulation and indifference. But for those who know what to look for, who take the time to inspect and appreciate the little details, the 1983 quarter holds endless possibilities. Every gouge, every tone shift, every oddity tells a story. And sometimes, those stories are worth small fortunes. So how do you begin your own search? First, look at the date, 1983. Then look closely at the reverse. Are the letters doubled? Is the design unusually fuzzy or thick? Next, check the color and weight. Does it feel lighter? Is it missing its nickel layer? Is the design off-center or incomplete? Anything unusual should raise your curiosity. Use a magnifier. Weigh the coin. Compare it to other quarters. And if you think you found something special, don't hesitate to have it evaluated by a reputable third-party grading service. Remember, the highest value coins are those in near-perfect condition with dramatic errors. But even a circulated 1983 quarter with a rare error can be worth thousands. The key is to look, to pay attention, and to never assume a coin is just a coin, because the 1983 US quarter dollar, the same coin that millions of Americans spent without a second thought, has, in rare cases, fetched between $38,000 and $108,000 at auction. All thanks to a handful of mistakes, anomalies, and sheer historical circumstance. So the next time you're handed change at the grocery store, or you spill coins from an old piggy bank, take a moment. Look closely. That quarter could be more than just 25 cents. It could be a ticket to a new adventure, a connection to history, or the start of a lifelong passion, and maybe, just maybe, it could be worth six figures. Every day, countless coins change hands unnoticed, passed over as nothing more than pocket change. They clink into cash registers, disappear into vending machines, and pile up in jars waiting to be rolled. But hidden among those common coins could be a quiet treasure, a piece of American history born from a rare mistake, a one-in-a-million fluke of the minting process. Tonight, we're uncovering the remarkable story of the 1997 US quarter dollar, a coin most people dismiss as ordinary, yet one that has commanded up to $90,000 at auction thanks to rare mint errors, unusual planchets, and dramatic anomalies. This is a story that proves even the most overlooked objects can carry extraordinary secrets. The year was 1997. The United States was enjoying an economic boom, the dot-com era was in full swing, and the U.S. Mint was gearing up for its most ambitious coin program in decades, the 50-state quarters program, which would debut in 1999. But in 1997, there was nothing flashy yet about the quarter. It still bore the familiar heraldic eagle reverse and the George Washington obverse, designs that had been unchanged since 1932. The Philadelphia and Denver mints struck over 1.4 billion quarters that year, flooding circulation with coins meant to be spent and forgotten. Yet among that sea of ordinary quarters, something remarkable happened. At both mints, a few mistakes slipped through the cracks. Some coins were struck on the wrong planchets, blank discs intended for other denominations or even foreign coins. Others exhibited dramatic doubling on the obverse or reverse, creating ghostly shadows and doubled letters that immediately caught the eyes of sharp collectors. These errors weren't intentional. They were fleeting lapses in a highly automated process. But they were enough to transform a simple 25-cent piece into a coveted collectible worth thousands. Take, for example, the double die obverse errors. This type of mistake occurs when the die used to stamp the design onto the blank shifts or rotates slightly between impressions, leaving doubled images on the coin. In 1997, a small handful of quarters from the Philadelphia Mint emerged with clear doubling on George Washington's profile and the word Liberty. Under magnification, these doubled features jump out, a ghostly outline of Washington's face and distorted, thickened letters that are impossible to ignore. One particularly well-preserved specimen, discovered in a roll of quarters by a collector in Ohio, was submitted for grading and later sold at auction for just over $42,000. Then there are the planchet errors, some of the most visually striking mistakes in all of numismatics. In rare cases, a 1997 quarter was struck on a planchet intended for a dime or a foreign coin, leaving the quarter undersized, oddly toned, and sometimes missing parts of the design entirely. One memorable example was a 1997 D quarter struck on a copper-nickel dime planchet, weighing only 2.3 grams instead of the usual 5.67 grams. Because of its pristine condition and unmistakable error, this coin sold at auction for more than $48,000. Another collector in Texas discovered a 1997 quarter with a missing clad layer. The copper core was exposed, giving the coin a reddish, penny-like color on one side. That specimen, graded as uncirculated, fetched nearly $30,000. And sometimes, the most breathtaking errors combine multiple anomalies. One 1997 quarter discovered in Michigan had both an off-center strike and was struck on the wrong planchet. The design was shifted dramatically to the side, leaving a large blank crescent of metal where the die hadn't hit. That coin, authenticated and graded by a top-tier service, sold privately for nearly $55,000, a life-changing windfall for someone who originally pulled it from loose change. Collectors value these coins not just for their monetary worth but also for what they represent, the unpredictable human and mechanical elements that occasionally disrupt even the most precise systems. In a year when over 1 billion quarters rolled off the presses, these flawed coins stand out as rare survivors, tangible reminders that perfection is never guaranteed. The story of the 1997 quarter also illustrates how a seemingly mundane year can become special through scarcity. By 1997, minting technology had improved significantly compared to earlier decades, and quality control was tighter than ever. That meant errors were less common, and when they did happen, they were more dramatic and far less likely to survive unnoticed. Combine that rarity with the fact that the quarters from this era were meant to circulate heavily, few people saved them in pristine condition, and you have a perfect storm for high value when the right kind of error emerges. One of the most compelling tales comes from a retired schoolteacher in Florida named Marion. In the late 2000s, she was rolling up coins for a local fundraiser when she noticed something odd about one of her quarters. It looked smaller, lighter, and the details on Washington's head seemed strange. She tucked it aside and brought it to a coin shop the next day. The dealer confirmed it was a double die obverse, one of the finest he'd seen. The coin was sent for grading and returned with a high mint state grade and strong doubling on the profile and motto. When it went to auction, it brought in $57,000, enough for Marion to take her entire family on a dream trip to Europe. She still keeps the auction certificate framed on her wall as a reminder of that lucky find. And then there's Jason, a college student from Illinois who, while searching through quarter rolls from his bank as part of a casual hobby, stumbled across a 1997 D quarter with an unmistakable error. It was struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin. He later learned it was struck on a 5.2-gram brass planchet meant for an Ecuadorian coin. The gold-toned quarter was a striking sight, and because of its rarity and condition, it eventually sold at auction for $62,000. For Jason, it was the discovery of a lifetime, proof that anyone, even a novice collector, can uncover hidden treasures if they know what to look for. So how do you spot one of these rare 1997 quarters yourself? Start by examining the obverse under magnification. Look for any signs of doubling, thickened letters, ghostly outlines on Washington's profile, or distortions in the motto. Next, check the edges and color. Does the coin appear thinner or lighter than a normal quarter? Is there a reddish hue from a missing clad layer? Does it look off-center or oddly shaped? Anything unusual warrants closer inspection. And most importantly, if you find something strange, resist the urge to clean it, leave it as is and seek an expert opinion. Even worn examples of these errors can bring in thousands. It's easy to forget that coins are more than just currency. They're miniature works of art, products of history, and sometimes, quiet little miracles born from chance. The 1997 quarter may seem ordinary at first glance, but in the right condition, with the right kind of error, it can become a showpiece, a tangible link to one of the rarest and most fascinating chapters in modern minting, and perhaps that's the real lesson of the 1997 quarter, to never overlook the ordinary. Because sometimes, hidden within the smallest and most familiar things, there's a story waiting to be discovered, a story that could change your life. After all, the rarest 1997 US quarter dollars have sold at auction for staggering amounts, ranging between $35,000 and $90,000. So the next time you find yourself with a handful of change, take a closer look. That quarter you're holding might just be a hidden treasure, a reminder that in the right light, even pocket change can shine like gold.